Buenas tardes to everyone. We are live with Andres Villarroel of Continental Insider, formerly known as Venezuela Insider, and he is joining us tonight from Latin America. I didn't quite get if it was Caracas or an undisclosed location, but we will be talking to him about the latest news out of Venezuela, out of the Bolivarian Republic, of which he's a citizen. Which is about the secondary sanctions on the Venezuelan oil exports. And we'll also, because we're off to a little bit of a delayed start, we'll also have a little bit of time to discuss what's going on in Argentina, which is one of our ESW Southern Cone correspondent's favorite topic, because he happens to reside in Buenos Aires. And a lot has happened in the last year, Andres. I mean, your business has grown in terms of its bandwidth. Obviously, you've rebranded from Venezuela Insider to Continental Insider, and we've rebranded as well, sort of shifted our focus with ESW. So we can start with that first. Tell us about why you rebranded to Continental Insider.
Yes, because I wanted to cover something outside, Venezuela. And on another name, I used to do it back on the day. So in order to have it, like a separate channel. Now I've been busy and I haven't creating content in the past week, and so I'm trying to pull off, in order to keep the pace. But I like to talk about, most of my content and my analysis is about economics worldwide, and I like to cover something, maybe Asia, maybe like the rest of Latin America, Europe, things like that.
Yeah, when we had you on the program the very first time, and you were our second guest, by the way, ever, this was almost this time last year. We talked about your background in developmental economics. We discussed some economic stuff related to, Paraguay being landlocked and a lot of things, all things Latin America related. But, we also touched on, why Venezuela is known for its beautiful ladies, and why the Venezuelan women have won so many Miss Universe pageants, and you've got some great videos up on your channel, which is linked up here on the screen for our audience, about some of the economics of the dating market, as it were, in Latin America, and sort of setting rational expectations for people when they come to Latin America, not to be too rosy in the expectations set by the passport bros and everything. So I really love a lot of your content. I think it's really innovative in terms of giving people a reality check on what things are really like in a city like Caracas or Medellin, or some of these other places that a lot of gringo males in midlife are going to.
Yeah, because I like to, I'm an economics geek, but also, I have a kind of a thing for dating, kind of an interest. And something I just realized like a decade or something like that is that the dating market, the same rules for the traditional markets, the stock market, Bitcoin, whatever may be the case, kind of the same rule applies. Is, basic economics applied with, of course, human nature that also are involved in the dynamic of the markets. So, it's just trying something to do something, funny. And usually when I cover these videos between dating and economics, it's just, usually I do it on the weekends in order to, relax from the brack stacks that we cover on other days.
Yeah, for sure. And I mean, I just have been impressed, like I said, with the breadth of it, but also the fact that you say it so concisely, and it's really impressive. And like I said, the main reason we wanted to have you on the show today was to talk about the secondary sanctions that the Trump administration has announced with great fanfare on Venezuela, because we've got a new Secretary of State, Marco Rubio, who's been very anti-Maduro government in Venezuela for a long time, as a United States Senator of Cuban American origin. And Venezuela, the Bolivarian Republic, government's been aligned with Cuba, and to a lesser extent maybe Nicaragua, in the sort of axis of leftists in Latin America. And so the question is, are we seeing, are these sanctions going to have real teeth, or is this more of just a politically symbolic move? So that's what I wanted to get your take on.
Okay, can you repeat the question because I'm kind of blurred on.
Yeah. We're having we were folks. We were having some audio issues before we launched, and that's one of the reasons we launched a little late today, late this afternoon. But yes, the question was, do these sanctions, in your opinion, have real teeth, or are they more of just a politically symbolic move?
Something in between, because the Venezuelan government knows how to navigate sanctions. Now, this is a different, this is a complete different game. Now it's with tariffs, and this time is not involving directly Venezuela. Is there indirect tariffs? Trump's weapons of choice, and it will depend on how serious the buyers of the crude oil will take it. China, they issue a statement,
Mm-hmm.
someone from the government, and they were, upset that this is, they are violating internal affairs of the country, yada yada.
Yeah.
India already took it. They not said something back, and actually they are going to stop buying crude oil. There is one of the handful of international companies, multinational companies, working in a country, in Venezuela, is Reliance. That is an Indian company.
Mm-hmm.
And right now, as far as I know, in India, they are negotiating a trade deal with Trump, something about tariffs. Apparently, Modi, the Hindu president, and Trump have a good relationship. So most likely, India won't buy Venezuelan oil. Spain has been the wild card, the other buyer of crude oil. Is that they say, they issue some strong statement against the Trump administration. So I don't know what's going on if Spain's gonna keep buying. China, I don't know. But right now, the consensus is that Venezuela still is gonna keep, exporting oil, but like on a discount rate, something like that. That's the expectation. We have to see.
Yeah, I mean, because we talked about this last year, and I was maybe a little bit naive saying that maybe Trump would go for some sort of détente with Caracas. But, the fact of the matter is, it seems like they're pursuing a policy of trying to at least seek détente with the Russians while they're sort of dropping the hammer on the Western Hemisphere, so to speak. So it's sort of a consolidation, if you will, of spheres of influence in the world. And unfortunately for Venezuela right now, it's got a government that's perceived as pretty weak, as a sort of inviting target, an easy target that can be squeezed. Exactly what are the real concessions? Is there any possible concession Caracas could make that would actually satisfy and the Trump administration get these sanctions listed or eased, or more likely, are we just going to see the screws sort of steadily tighten while Venezuela looks to, let's say, impersonate the fraternal Russian allies in terms of figuring out end arounds or ways to transfer crude oil at sea, or different, let's say, schemes to go through third countries. I mean, obviously, Indian refiners, some of them politically connected to Modi, have made a lot of money refining Russian crude oil and reselling it to Europe at a considerable markup. And then you have the Chinese, they always make a very big deal in the Bloomberg or Wall Street Journal whenever any Chinese company in Shandong or some port on the East China Sea, supposedly bends the knee to the Russia sanctions, but then they don't cover like all the other companies, Chinese companies in some bank you've never heard of, in some provincial place that starts suddenly, processing those Russian transactions. So the Chinese seem to take a sort of, two steps forward, one step back kind of posture where they sort of pretend to comply, but then they don't really comply. And I think with Modi, it seems like, Trump is maybe using some of these secondary sanctions on India as sort of leverage to get the maximal, bargaining power with the Indians on his side, so that, maybe they'll announce some huge arms deal or some, massive purchase of American crude oil or grain or something, that Trump can tout as a win, and walk away from. So I don't know, like, where it's going. I mean, obviously, it does seem like more political turmoil in our own hemisphere is on the way. I wanted to ask you a follow-up question after the sanctions, which was how the Venezuelan media is reporting the fact that some Venezuelan nationals are now being deported, not back to Venezuela, which isn't taking them, or Trump is saying isn't taking them, but to these jails in El Salvador, run by Nayib Bukele. So I want to kind of get your opinion weighing in on that.
Well, I get a lot of information. It's not by particular expertise, because you get a lot of news from all over the world, and also depending on the political bias. But the information that I got is your first, the 238, I believe the number, of Venezuelans have been sent to the SECOT, the Bukele's prison in El Salvador.
Yeah.
And they were accused to be gang members
of this Tren de Aragua gang, right?
Tren de Aragua, yes. Yeah. That's the name. Now, the issue is that apparently a cohort of those migrants sent to El Salvador, apparently they are not gang members, and that has been something in the media in the whole Latin America. The human rights organizations, NGOs, are working around it. For instance, I saw an interview of a lady that is the wife of one of the guys, and the guy was a cook or something like that, and so apparently he's not a gang member, and so it's has been messy. And also apparently in the United States they haven't done the due process. They just they have a tattoo or something like that, and they send them to the prison. I read something just like yesterday that one of the people sent to El Salvador, the only tattoo that they have is an autism awareness tattoo or something like that. He's a small businessman and he was sent to El Salvador anyways. So honestly, I don't know, but yeah, it's getting a lot of coverage in the whole Latin America.
Right, not just in Venezuela. So it's sort of the ugly gringo, just snatching up brown people and tossing them into Bukele's jail. Yeah,
exactly.
Yeah, that's the way it's fun.
No, and also you have people like this, cosplayer secretary, Noem, and I mean, with all due respect, is someone that I have, nothing against. I'm not in either side of politics in any place, and not even in the United States. But she's sending this vibe of the typical gringo that is kind of a, all due respect, a little bit ignorant, that calls every country in Latin America Mexico or something like that. And she's giving that vibe. And
yeah. I mean, she did do the pose, the deportation Barbie, as some people call her, pose in front of the deportees who were in the jail. Well, not necessarily the Venezuelan deportees, I should say. These were probably Salvadorian gang member prisoners. Salvadorian gang member prisoners. And by the way, not just to be fair, a lot of these gang members in that jail do have, rap sheets a mile long. It's not like everybody there is some, is innocent, but at the same time, it's like, but at the same time, like, just to be fair and balanced, let's say, to use the Fox News phrase, we do want to admit that there are some valid human rights concerns out there in terms of, for example, the ICE agents not identifying themselves. You see masked men, and suddenly, you're surrounded, and how do you know these people are federal agents and they're not maybe, I don't know, cartel members who are kidnapping you and selling you into sex slavery or something like that if you're a young woman who's being deported or what have you. So it's, you have to make sure that, I, for one, believe that the United States should enforce its immigration laws. I think Biden was a disaster in terms of open borders, and that it ultimately, I think what Biden did hurt both of our countries. It hurt Venezuela's image because it, Venezuela isn't always sending its best. Let's put it that way. But it also, probably did some damage to the image of the United States in Venezuelan eyes because a lot of these people came to the U.S. and then they realized, well, there wasn't really much in the way of work for them, or what have you. Their parole status could be revoked at any time. It was a very, let's say, tenuous status, and it served both of our countries, I think, very poorly, what Biden did. And so mainly I blame him, but in his administration. But that being said, I think Trump has to, people are supposed to have a right to a deportation hearing, if they legally have some legal status that is being revoked, right? They have a right to challenge that in court. So how to do that in a fair way where people get their day in court, but it's not like the whole system doesn't just get hopelessly clogged because you have all these liberal activist judges who don't want to see future Democratic voters, let's say, get deported or what have you, or think deportation is inherently racist. Well, how do you deal with that? I mean, that's sort of the whole dysfunctional problem here that we have in our country right now that unfortunately is affecting the whole hemisphere, along with our never-ending appetite for narcotics. So with that being said, I wanted to ask you, we can segue really quickly to another sort of hemispheric hot topic, which is what's going on in Argentina right now, because that's not maybe as much on the radar of Americans, of North Americans especially, but you have the fact that the Milei government, which has been hailed by libertarians and the Trump administration as making Argentina great again, they're running into a big problem, which is the Argentine peso. Specifically, that it's getting like the band in which it was trading with the dollar is breaking because the smart money is all betting that the peso, they're going to have to basically devalue.
James, can you give me one quick, like 30 seconds?
Yeah, sure.
Give me 30 seconds here.
Okay, hi. Andres is back.
Okay, yeah. Sorry.
So I wanted to, we mentioned that because we started late that we kind of have a quick blitz show, and then maybe we'll have you back on in a month or two. Hopefully by that time we won't even need StreamYard anymore. We'll be using our own io.tv streaming platform. But yeah, Andres, I wanted to get your opinion about what's happening in Argentina, because you have this background as a developmental economist, or you've studied developmental economics, and particularly what's happened in Argentina before in the 80s and the 90s, 2000s. So I wanted to get your opinion about where you see this Argentine peso. Are we on the cusp of basically an Argentine peso crisis, like a blowout, where they lose control over the trading band and they just have to devalue?
Well, it depends, because first, let's see how if this thing is gonna come to fruition. First, in Argentina, they are doing something like the equivalent of Doge they have one ministry is something similar like Doge in Elon, so they are cutting public spending. The issue is apparently is with the central bank and the liabilities of the central bank. And what they have done is, since the Argentine government in Argentina, both the executive and also the central bank, and also the local regional governments, like in the Buenos Aires city and the province of Buenos Aires and several others, there is a bunch of debt. And right now, what they are trying to do, let's go quickly with the last event, is with the IMF. that the people hate the IMF, and they have extended a loan of $20 billion with some some crazy conditions. Apparently, the plan of the Milei administration is to clear debt to the central bank, and then basically organize this whole government debt in just one stream. And this is as far as I know in Argentina. Can you hear me?
Yeah, I'm here. You just were cutting out about a minute ago. Yeah.
Oh, okay. Well, and apparently it's just cleaning up the issue with the debt, because right now there is there is a barrier of the currency exchange. In Argentina, they call it the cepo, basically the barrier, and they have it since 2019, and before that they had a bunch of years as well. So basically, something that would the measure that would be very popular is to release the cepo. But since they have a lot of that liabilities, the exchange rate, if they
Right.
do
We're
it,
talking dollar denominated debts here, right? These are not Argentine peso
yes,
debts that can just be all
now,
inflated away. Yeah.
yes, because they have the bank, and also they had something, in Argentina is something that you have also to keep up day by day. In Argentina, you have this particular financial debt assets issued by the central bank called LELIX, that basically is to the commercial banks that these particular instruments, and this is something complicated, maybe I'm going to miss a thing or two. Maybe an
Yeah.
Argentinian economist watching this maybe can explain better. The LELIX is something that is printed money in pesos just for holding out your dollars for the banks. So basically, that creates, and with a high rate, of payment, the interest rate, a very high interest rate in pesos, usually over the inflation rate that, that creates, this loop of creating,
The
more.
bicicleta, I believe, is what they call it, right? Because you have this carry
Yeah,
trade going on.
it's a carry trade. Now,
Yeah.
no, but the carry trade is another thing. It's because right now the incentives that the, they are getting in order to use in order to get, the dollars and the pesos, that's what is known as the bicicleta or the Argentinian carry trade. And but right now, apparently the plan is to clean up everything from the this all of this step in order to simplify it, and then by the end of the year, this is one of the campaign's promise of Milei, in order to release the cepo, basically having a free market exchange rate between the peso and the US dollar. But if it's not done correctly, the real exchange rate can explode, and that have created a bunch of issues in the past in Argentina, like maybe a bank run or something like that.
Yeah, didn't that happen under what was it, around 2000, around the turn of the millennium? They had a full out peso crisis.
Yes, with De La Rua. And this is something that Milei wants to avoid, De La Rua moment.
Right, right. So because
And,
go ahead, Andre.
no, and the other thing, what they are doing right now in the past year and a half, they are doing a crawling peg. So basically trying the exchange rate, the black market exchange rate that in Argentina is known as dollar blue, uh, compared to the official exchange rate that is artificially low, of course. So the Milei government, what they are trying to do, they have been doing in the past year, is a crawling peg. Basically, keeping it close, so keeping a narrow gap in order to be manageable and give stability to the economy. And the end result has been is that the Argentine peso on the street has appreciated compared to the US dollar. So that's what that created. I mean, you probably heard it on Twitter and on X. that many people 2022, 2023, they were getting Buenos Aires on a very cheap deal, and right now has gotten very expensive on U.S.
Correct.
currency.
Yeah, that's what the Argentina bros are talking about. You've seen some of them. Buy Sell BA is an account that, well, that gentleman who runs it, he's a very successful property developer. He's got many properties in Buenos Aires and around the country. He's been buying properties in Argentina since 2004, I believe, so about 21 years. And he's very patient with Milei. Obviously, he understands that draining the swamp, as it were, that the Peronists have built up for decades is an immense task. But the problem is that Milei does not have full control over the country's monetary policy because Caputo, Michael Caputo, is his economics minister is driving that train. And unfortunately, it's not Milei-nomics, it's Caputo-nomics that Argentina is experiencing in basically the consensus opinion of the people that I'm reading on Argentina right now. So
I said
that
it myself. I said it myself like a year ago.
yeah,
That I was a little bit. I mean, I have nothing against Toto Caputo because sometimes he's a policymaker rather than a politician.
yeah,
So it depends a lot. Milei has a handful of people around him that they were around Macri when he was president. So,
right.
in particular, and this is from empirical experience, not from macro, is having a repeat of Macri. That was one of my main concerns.
Right. I mean, that's what, like I said, you've got Bloomberg, you've got, I think JP Morgan Chase has raised the country risk, you know, profile or alert for Argentina, and Bloomberg is saying there's going to be a devaluation now. It's that the devaluation is going to basically accompany the IMF agreement or be a condition of the IMF agreement of receiving those tranches, because obviously we're not talking about $20 billion in lump sum. It doesn't get flown in, on planes and barrels of cash or anything like that. It's transferred according to conditions of the IMF agreement. So the problem is, again, there's not like a ton of room. There's still a lot of waste and graft and things going on and schemes that have yet to be unwound. Like I said, the swamp is deep, it's being drained. But the problem is, just as with Doge, is that yeah, there was an immense amount of fraud in U.S. government spending, especially the spending that has blown out of proportion since the COVID, sort of opened the floodgates, as it were, for a lot of schemes and graft. But the problem is that, um, you know, fiscal tightening, belt tightening, only gets you so far when you don't have control of the currency, right? When you lose control of your currency, and this has been the problem in Europe too with the EU, right? Because they don't have control of their currency. Like when the Greeks, they implemented the austerity measures, right? It didn't bring their economy back to life because, again, they couldn't go back to the drachma. They couldn't go back to the lira in Italy either, when you had these so-called pigs crisis in the early 20 teens, right? So they got the bailout money from Brussels, but it came with those austerity conditions. And people are saying on the left, and even some libertarian economists who were, very favorable to Milei, who was, when he was critical of the IMF when he was running for office, like Carlos Maslaton, are saying that, that this is not going to work because, you're just going to end up pushing more and more Argentines into poverty. You're going to drive away the tourists because, I get a lot of these street anecdotes. You were talking about a minute ago how Buenos Aires has gone from maybe 5 years ago, one of the cheapest major cities in the hemisphere or cheapest capitals, to now the most expensive, where people are literally paying when they go to a steak restaurant, and Argentina's famous for its beef. They're literally paying more than they would pay for a steak in Paris or in, they're comparing it to Los Angeles prices, which is just outlandish. My ESW Southern Cone contributing writer, David Siegel, had a burrito the other day at a nice, sit down, family friendly Mexican restaurant in Buenos Aires, in one of the, nicest areas of Buenos Aires. And he paid about $16 for it, which, is pretty much about the same as what you pay for it where I live in the US. So, I mean, you're looking at a situation where obviously this can't go on, and the economist Herbert Stein is famous for saying things that can't go on won't. Eventually, they break. So it looks like the IMF is basically forcing their hand, and I've seen some, let's say, silver lining theories that maybe this is necessary because they have to finally fix the peso dollar peg, or it'll just kill their tourism and all the other external trade by making the Argentine wines and the beef and everything else that Argentina exports too expensive, right? So they almost have to do this, but the question is, how painful is it going to be?
Okay, well, right now there are two things in favor of late, and one of the things about this deregulation department, the Argentinian Doge, is that it's not only about fiscal, it's about reducing the bureaucracy and the frictions in order to do business, like importing, exporting, or producing within the country. So, if on this qualitative rather than quantitative measures by the regulation department, also that can be trickled down, that trickles down to the rest of the economy and become more efficient. And the other thing is regarding the confidence that Milei can give or not. So, for instance, the next test will be the midterm elections that we're going to have later on this year. Afterwards, you can see if actually Milei can take charge now with control of the National Congress and see if it can roll over every particular project that he has in order to become, being more, make Argentina more libertarian. Well, because still a lot to fix, not only on the federal level, but also on regional level. He's having issues with the regional authorities that many times are not are on the other side of the aisle, like in Buenos Aires.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I guess we'll have to wrap up here in the next 5 minutes, but um, economically, what's going on in Venezuela? I mean, to turn it just away from the sanctions for a minute, because last when we had you on last year, I think you were cautiously optimistic about the future of Venezuela, that things were on the upswing, that they were starting to get better, especially in Caracas and in the more, let's say, affluent corners of the country, where at least some money that had gone abroad had returned, at least to reinvested in real estate and things like that. Do you still feel like Venezuela can weather the storm of these secondary sanctions, or do you feel like it's just going to just hammer the Venezuelan economy and we could see some potential unrest? I mean, how are you feeling about your native land? I guess gut feeling right
No,
now.
I'm positive for the long run, honestly. I'm
So am I.
yeah, and I'm a glass half full kind of guy, and but also because I know the underlying value of my country, not only on natural resources but on the intangibles, and that trickles down to tangible, economic growth for the future. It's just navigating to the frictions and things like that. And right now, the sentiment is, I have to say, is negative. I'm talking overall on the macro level, but it's not this draconian pessimist sentiment, but it's it's negative compared to, let's say, a year ago, the last time that we spoke.
Yeah.
So I don't know what is gonna go, what is gonna happen with this particular tariffs scheme. Like I said, I think it's gonna be the same oil put on a discount. Also, Chevron left the country. That's 250 barrels less per year,
You mean
and
250,000 barrels less?
250,000 is
Yeah.
260. I don't remember. That's the ballpark number, and there's over 200,000. And the other issue is what's gonna happen not only with the sanctions, but also with how the authorities will react regarding the sanctions. And for instance, the U.S. stopped buying oil since the last year of the first Trump administration, and then the first couple of years with Biden, and then after the issue with Russia and Ukraine, late that year is when they restarted buying oil again. So, and on that particular time span, the Venezuelan economy grew. So, now, of course, it was more of a dead cat bounce kind of thing. So honestly, I mean, seeing a major collapse, I don't see it happening. It's just there is an economist, a Venezuelan economist, that has the term stability on the term, on the stability on the pit. I'm sorry. So that's the scenario that I see right now. Of course, that can change. This is just with the current status quo. What I see is a marginal growth on the next couple of years until the status quo changes.
Right. I mean, I think that's a fair assessment. I mean, we'll have to have you back on because obviously we're short on time today from the late start to discuss, sort of your impressions of the expats you've worked with over the last year and what you're seeing in terms of the expat market, let's say, and the reasons why they're coming to Venezuela or neighboring Colombia as well. I mean, I know you've really expanded your bandwidth over the last year, and now you're working with people around Latin America, and looking at some of the other countries that might be overlooked, like Peru, or safe havens like traditional Latin American safe havens like Uruguay, with its banking, attractive banking sector for South America. So we'll have to have you back on. I think maybe even in another month or two, once we get our new audio streaming set up, where we won't need StreamYard anymore, and we'll have a new platform, and hopefully that'll help with some of the issues we had today. And it's been a pleasure having you back on the program, Andres, and we look forward to having you back on a third time. So thank you for your time this evening. We really appreciate you joining us from LATAM, and we look forward to speaking with you again soon.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for having me. Always my pleasure.
Okay, good night. Buenas
Take care.
noches.